into Overcomers TV on your favorite app or streaming platform. It's time to overcome.
The birth of Aslan started really over 50 years ago in a little town in southeastern New Mexico called Portales. And my wife and I grew up there, and we met there and we fell in love there, and we went to college there. And the particular college I went to, I was getting my degree. I wanted to get a pre-med degree so I could go to medical school. And so I'd grown up in a home where mom and dad taught us about Christ, but the problem was that it was still more of a church kind of relationship. It never had been personalized. That wasn't their fault, it was my fault that I had never allowed it to become personal. So the more that I learned in my classes in college, the more they tried to deconstruct my faith. So my teachers in biology and microbiology and chemistry spent so much of their time actually ridiculing the idea that God created the heavens and the earth, and pushing the idea that it was a complete accident. And the trouble with this little young man was that I was very confused by that, and I didn't have any depth in my faith. The roots didn't go down anywhere with my faith. So it was quickly, what little faith I had growing up was quickly being destroyed. So into my junior year in college, I'd taken nothing but science and math all 3 years. So my counselor told me, this is a liberal arts college. You're gonna have to take English and all this stuff that you don't want to take, and you're gonna have to do it your senior year because you haven't done it yet. So I didn't like it, but my wife, Lynn Ann, was taking a class in New Testament history, which was across the street, secular university. They couldn't talk about Jesus on the university, but you could walk across the street and take a class that was history credit. And the person that taught the class used the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And it was like every page was a new revelation to me. I mean, it was just like, and the whole other side of my brain, I grew up with doing very well in school, in going on the science track, but I also had a lot of music and other stuff in the other half of my brain, but I never allowed it to grow. And so that whole creative side and writing and all that stuff, as I took this course, it's like God just literally switched from the scientific brain over to the creative brain and said, this is where you belong. And so at the end of that class, I knew that I was going to have to change my major, and so I did. So I actually had 2 senior years in college. I took the first year, and then I finished with a degree in religious studies. And so I had a minor in chemistry and math and all this other stuff, and religious studies, which didn't seem to go together. But then I didn't want to be a pastor of a church. I knew that wasn't what I was called to be. And so Lynn Ann said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, gee, I don't know. What are we going to do? And so a group came through recruiting for you to give a year of your life working in a Christian program in the Northeast, in the New York City area. They had planted programs in 11 of the cities in the greater New York City area. And so they said, give us a year. You have to raise your own support, which was difficult in our little town of 11,000 people, especially when we told them that we were going to be working in basically an all African American community. When we went to it was kind of like, that's strange, because in the town I grew up in, there were no black people growing up. It was only when I got to college that there were black students that were in our university. So, but Lynn Ann and I also grew up during the riotous 60s, and we were really impacted by Martin Luther King Jr. and the things that were happening in the African American community that were wrong, that were bad, that were putting these people down and holding them down. And so we decided to give a year of our life. So we moved to New Jersey. That was in 1971, and we never looked back. We never planned on staying forever, but these children captured our hearts and our souls. I mean, it was like we knew that this was what we were called to do. And so telling that to our parents, both sets, who had sent us through school and been waiting for us to become, Lynn Ann was getting her degree in education, she was going to teach, and I was going to go to med school and all this stuff. It was very difficult. And I'm sure that we did some things wrong in the way that we approached it, but they also had to give some and we gave some. And finally, we explained to them that this is what we were called to do. And so over a 2 or 3 year period, they were able to finally accept this. And so we actually moved back after a year in the Northeast. We fell in love with these children. We had tutoring programs, Bible classes, sports programs, everything, working with basically black kids in the very difficult projects in the area of New Jersey where we live. So we moved back to the Southwest, and we left New Jersey saying we'll be back in 3 weeks. But the program that we were with went out of business. They closed down all their programs. They didn't have enough funding. And so we would have to start up our own program. We were 23 years old. And it's like we had no visible means of support. I mean, like we were getting maybe $150 of support a month to live on. And that, even in those days, that was poverty level. So we ended up, a long story short, we ended up getting together with my sister and her husband. And we had a singing group called Aslan. So we started ministering down on the streets of El Paso, Texas. And God just filled our hearts again with love for these people, mostly who had substance abuse problems, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug problems. And we were able to really lead some people to find hope. And yet in our hearts, God just kept this nagging feeling. And one day I was in El Paso. I stopped and sat down at a park underneath a tree, and I said, God, you've either got to take this out of my heart or we're moving back to New Jersey. So I went back home and I said to Lynn Ann, we got to go. And she said, I know. So we talked to my sister and her husband, and we said, we got to go. We want you guys to come with us. And they prayed about it, and over a period of time, they said yes. And so in 1975, we moved back to New Jersey a second time, the 4 of us. And it was really, really tough. It was hard to make it. No one wanted us there. No one cared that we were there. And in those first 10 years, it was a struggle to stay alive. And yet we all had college degrees. We could have gone out easily and got jobs. But God basically said, are you going to trust me by faith that I'll take care of it? Or are you going to trust in your job and your degrees? So we refused to go out and get jobs and just kept trusting him and stayed on our knees a lot. And over time, God built a base of support. So fast forward through all that time, we went back with the same children, some of the same kids we work with. We started building the program. More and more kids came. We had tutoring programs, what we call our Right Choices Bible class. It's teaching kids what to choose, that there are right choices in life, and that they have a choice to make, whether or not they're going to make a wrong choice or a right choice. And it's basic values. It's Galatians. It's peace, patience, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, which, as even Paul says, you can't argue with that. And so we did sports programs, all this stuff, the same thing that we'd done with the other program. And our program started growing, and God started multiplying them. And then my oldest son, Danielle, went on a mission trip with a group from Florida called Teen Missions International. And he spent the summer in Uganda as a 14-year-old boy. And he fell in love with the Ugandan people. And he had the most amazing experiences eating termites, which he said were really very tasty. One time he and a friend were in the cho, which is the toilet that the Ugandan people built for them. And all of a sudden they looked down, and there was 4 inches of army ants that were marching through that area, and they were crawling up their legs and stinging them. And so they started jumping and screaming and laughing. And then one day he and another boy were playing with these little worms, and they found out they were baby cobras. And the poison is so concentrated that even though one of the boys got bit on his hand, and Danielle, they thought he might have gotten bit on the shoulder because one of them, he had flipped the little worm up in the air and it landed on his shoulder, and he brushed it off. So they were going through the Ugandan bush in a pickup truck, going to a Buddhist clinic out in the middle of nowhere, where they gave him these anti-venom shots. And the boy that was with him, his hand was 3 times its normal size by the time they got back that night, but he got okay. And but when he came home, he said, Dad, Mom, you've got to take our kids to Haiti, to Africa. They have to see it. Their heritage is just the people are so beautiful and they sing like heaven. And he went on and on and on. So we really tried very hard to do that. The problem was that to take one Aslan kid to Haiti cost $2,000 just for the airfare there and back. To Uganda, I'm sorry, not to Haiti. Thank you. And so, you know, yeah, it's like, you know, we said, man, we'd love to go to Africa, but we can't do it because it's so incredibly expensive. And so we had a friend who talked to us, and he said, well, let's go to Haiti together. And I said, Haiti? Where's that? Literally. I was that ignorant. He said, well, it's down in the Caribbean. But he said they've completely kept their African heritage, 100% of it. When missionaries come to Haiti, they say, from Africa, they say, I'm home. So we said, okay, let's do that. So through my oldest son and his girlfriend, his fiance, who was wanting to become a nurse, we came down in 1975 for our first trip down. And again, just like when Lynette and I first moved to New Jersey, God worked in our heart and he said, this is your second home. Your first home is New Jersey, your second home is Haiti. So you get used to it because you're coming back. And everybody thought we were crazy. They said, you have a successful ministry here in New Jersey, you're wasting your time. One guy that was supposedly a friend of our ministry said they should just take a bomb and drop it on Haiti and it turn it into the ocean. You know, I mean, things like that we were like, what? And one time we visited some children over in Port-au-Prince that Mother Teresa started a branch of her work there. And most of these children are dying of AIDS or tuberculosis, and people come and leave them on the steps of the church, and the sisters just take care of them night and day, changing diapers, and they just nurse them until they die. They treat them with such love and care. So we went in to hold these children, and the nurse said, now, when you hold them, when you put them down, they're going to start screaming because they never get held. The nurses don't have time to pick them up and love them. They just have time to change their beds, and you know they're just running because there were 125 children with like five missionary sisters there. So we picked these children up, and the one that I was holding was so weak that she was trying to cry, but she couldn't cry. You couldn't hear her. It was just like her mouth was going like that, but she was that weak. And so, you know, it was such a profound experience. I came back and wrote about it. And a lady actually wrote us a note and said, these people should never have been born. And I thought, whoa, how could somebody be that hard and that cruel in their hearts that they really believe they could say something like that? And it just showed, though, how some people view the kind of poverty that we deal with here in Haiti. They really don't understand it. They don't understand that Jesus didn't just say, stay in Jerusalem and minister to people in Jerusalem. He said Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. So with Jesus, it's never either or. It's always both and. And so Aslan is both and. We're both in New Jersey and we're in the developing world in Haiti. And so we came back the second year. Nobody expected us to come back. After the third year, people were like, maybe they'll come back again, but we really don't believe it. And then we started coming twice a year, and we started sponsoring children in school, and eventually we were able to purchase this land that we're sitting on, and God has just done an amazing work. But that's kind of the long version of how God led us. And again, it's I use the scripture, or that's not a scripture, it's the verse of the song Amazing Grace, where the wonderful writer of Amazing Grace said, "'Tis grace hath brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home." And that's kind of the way that we look at our ministry, because we operate day to day with our ministry in New Jersey and in our ministry here. It's we don't have any huge sponsorships and people that underwrite the whole ministry or things like that. It's just people giving some of them out of their need. They give to us to come down here. As I was coming the other day, there was a wonderful man that picked me up at 3 o'clock in the morning at a hotel in Queens to take me to the airport. And it just so happened he was a Christian. And of course, these guys make their money on taking people back and forth as a shuttle. And he began to talk to me. I began to tell him what we're doing. And as I was leaving, I got a couple, $3 or $4 out to give to him. And he said, absolutely not. I will not accept any money. He said, you use that for the ministry. And, you know, God's going to bless him for that, because that's the way he makes us living. But what can I say? It's just the way life is. Is that enough?
Tune in to Overcomers TV on your favorite app or streaming platform. It's time to overcome.